All right, in this lesson we're going to talk about slope and kind of introduce what slope is and also show you a few different ways to find slope, do a few examples. A slope is the steepness of a line. And I'm just going to kind of go through a long list of some directions. If you need to write this down, you can pause it. A slope, which we use the letter M to represent slope in math. So when you see the letter M, that stands for slope. A slope is the number of units that a line rises or falls for each unit of horizontal change from left to right. Sometimes you'll refer to slope as the rise over the run. Okay, so as it said on the previous one, the line's rising and falling, that's the rise. And then the horizontal change from left to right, that's the run. Okay, well, rise is up and down, that's vertical. And run is left and right, that's horizontal. So sometimes you'll hear people refer to slope as the vertical change over the horizontal change. Now when you have a coordinate plane, vertical axis is the y-axis and the horizontal axis is the x-axis. So slope is sometimes referred to as the change in y over the change in x. Okay, and that little triangle in front of the y and triangle in front of the x are Greek letter deltas, delta y over delta x, okay, and it refers to the change in y over the change in x. Just a shorthand way to write that. Okay, then there's a formula for slope. Okay, and so the slope of any non-vertical line through points x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2 can be found using the following formula. And those little numbers are subscripts, that's all they are. They just refer to the x-coordinate of the first point, y-coordinate of the first point. X-coordinate of the second point, y-coordinate of the second point. And this is how you find slope using a formula. And if you think about change mathematically, change is found by subtracting. So the change in y, you would subtract the two y-coordinates, and the change in x, you would subtract the two x-coordinates. And you would write that the change in y over the change in x. And the order of the points doesn't matter. You can take the second y minus the first y or the first y minus the second y. As long as in the bottom, you maintain the order. So it's either x sub 2 minus x sub 1 or x sub 1 minus x sub 2, depending on how you subtracted your y's. Now I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you three ways, or show you three ways that you can find slope. One, we're going to use a graph, and what we would do is we would find where the 2 points are located, or if you had a line, you're going to put a step in and just find out what the rise and run are and write that ratio, rise over run. The second way we're going to do it is we're going to use a table. And we're going to take the coordinates from our points and we're going to put them into a table, an XY table, and you're going to find the change in y, and you're going to write that over the change in x. And then lastly, we'll do the formula, okay, where we would just plug in the x and y coordinates from our points that we know right into the formula, and we would evaluate. And we're going to do each one of those three methods I'm going to use for this example. So we're going to find the slope of the line that passes through the points 1, 2, and 3, 7. And I'm labeling them A and B. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use a graph. And so when we have our graph, we're going to put our points in. 1, 2 would go right here. And that's point A. And 3, 7.
Bree, David, if you are here, please come to the front office. Bree, if you're here, you need to come to the front office immediately. Thank you.
And there's point B. Now all we're going to do at this point, remember that the slope is the rise over the run. And that's what slope is. So we'll start at one point, say A, and rise, which means I'm going to put in a vertical line here. And then from there we'll run across to the point. Okay, the rise is positive 5 and the run is positive 2. And so the slope would be positive 5 over positive 2, which is 5 halves. Now your 5 halves could be written 5 halves, 2 1/2, 2.5. Okay, all of these things are exactly the same thing as 5 halves. Okay, we could also then find our slope by putting the step in underneath. Starting at point B, now we would have to come down, and then we would go left. And now here we're going down 5 and left 2. And so those numbers would be negative. Slope is still rise over run, so -5 over -2. That still equals 5/2. So it doesn't matter if you put your step above the line or below the line. The rise and the run are exactly the same. When you go back to the original, one of the original definitions, we said that slope was the number of units that a line rises for every 1 unit of horizontal change. If you look, when you go 1 unit of horizontal change, you've gone up 1, 2.5. That's to get to that point. And that's what 5/2 equals, 2.5. So that's your slope. And now we're going to use a table. So I'm going to make a quick table here.
Bryce Campbell, if you're in the building, please come to the front office. Bryce Campbell.
We'll make a quick XY table. And we'll plug in the coordinates. So this is X and this is Y. So X is 1 and Y is 2. X is 3 and Y is 7. Okay, and now, remember, the slope we said was the change in Y over the change in X. Well, we just go through and we find what those changes are. Y was 2 and it's now 7, that's up 5. X was 1 and it's now 3, that's up 2. And so our slope is +5 over +2, and we get that same 5/2. And that's exactly what we had right here, 5/2. We did it with the graph on this page. Here we did it with the table, change in Y over change in X. Same 2 points, we should have the same answer. And then the third thing I said I'd show you how to use the formula. Here's the formula. Hey, there's the formula. I also said that you could write it this way. Y sub 1 minus Y sub 2. X sub 1 minus X sub 2. Hey, in the ordered pairs, this is X sub 1. And this is Y sub 1. This is X sub 2, and that's Y sub 2. Remember, the subscripts just refer to which point. First point, second point. And now all we have to do is go through and find the slopes. Now if you use this one, Y sub 2 is 7, minus Y sub 1 is 2. X sub 2 is 3, and X sub 1 is 1. And so our slope is the same 2 things, 5/2. Now if you were to do it in the opposite order, all that happens is these numbers just change orders. You have 2 minus 7 and 1 minus 3, which would be -5 over -2, but negative over negative is a positive. So there we've done all 3 of the ways I said we do it. Hey, on this page we got the formula, the table, and on this page we've got the graph. Hey, when I do it, I'm going to do the formula, but you're welcome to use any way you want. The least efficient would be the graphing, because you have to graph it all out and put your points in. All right, now what we're going to do is go through. These are the 4 possibilities for lines. Okay, in the coordinate plane. All lines will either rise from left to right, like the top left picture. They would fall from left to right, like the top right. They would be a horizontal line, like the lower left, or they'd be a vertical line, like the lower right. Okay, in all of these, lines that go up from left to right have positive slope. Okay, the value would be determined based on the points. Okay, but the answer would have a positive sign. Lines that go down, those are going to have negative slope. And if you just think of rise and run, okay, that's positive, and the run is positive. the rise over run, positive over positive, equals a positive. And if you put your step in underneath, that would be a negative. And so with that, negative over a negative is also equal to a positive. And you could do the same thing to show why it's a negative slope. On the downward sloping line, it would be either a positive over a negative or a negative over a positive. Horizontal lines have zero slope, or a slope that is equal to the number 0. And vertical lines have what is called undefined slope, where the slope is undefined. So that's just when you eyeball a line, you should immediately know. If the line goes up left or right, it's positive. If it goes down left or right, it's negative. If it's horizontal, it's 0. And if it's vertical, it's undefined. Okay, so here are some problems to work through, some samples. I'll just run through these quick. Here's the formula. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So when we do this, it's 9 minus 4 over 1 minus negative 2. And that would be 5 over 3. Remember, if you reverse the formula, the only thing that would happen is you'd get negative 5 over negative 3, but that's still a positive. On this one, when you subtract your y's, you get 7 minus 7, and 3 minus 1, or 1 minus 3, either way, doesn't matter. And this would be 0 over 2, which equals 0. And 0 divided by 2 is 0. If you think about where those points would be, that would be a horizontal line. That's why the slope is 0. Down here we would have negative 1 minus 5 and negative 4 minus negative 6. And that would be negative 6 over positive 2. And that equals negative 3 or negative 3 over 1. And then the last one here, 10 minus 5. Negative 2 minus negative 2. When you do that, you're going to get 5 over 0. Okay, and that means that m is undefined, or the slope is undefined. So again, to quickly review about slope. Slope tells us how steep a line is. Okay, it's the rise over the run. Okay, there is a formula. I showed you 3 ways in the video: using a graph, by putting in a step, using a table to find out how much x and y change, or using the formula. And we did 3 examples. That's how you use a graph. Okay, you plot the points, you put a step in from one point to another, and then you just plug in rise over run. Okay, if you're going to do a table, okay, you plot the coordinates in, you find out how much y changes, and you write that over how much x changes, and then there was the formula. Okay, we talked about lines, and when lines that go up are positive, lines that go down are negative. Horizontal have 0 slope, and vertical has undefined slope. And then there are 4 examples. I said I would use the formula. You can choose to do it any way you want. Remember, you can switch the formula and do 4 minus 9 and negative 2 minus 1. Your answer is still the same as what we have here.